One thing that is pretty much an inseparable part of almost every GTA is the fact that some regions of the map only unlock as you progress through the story. At the beginning, usually you just have a certain fragment, but since putting an invisible barrier and saying that the player can't go somewhere just because they said so would look kinda lame, the devs in their games always, or rather in most cases, tried to justify it somehow. I'm talking of course about story reasons. Once before, a video like that came out on the channel, but since there's still a lot more that could be said on this topic, and many details were skipped in that video, well, today we'll go through the topic again. In GTA 3, the matter is clear to the point where you almost don't need to dig to know what's what. After all, already in the very first cutscene, the Colombians carry out an act of vandalism on a huge scale, planting explosives and blowing the bridge into tiny pieces, totally destroying it. But the question comes up, why did the gangsters go for such a crazy stunt? In other words, what interest did the cartel have in cutting off Portland from the rest of the city? Turns out, there's more behind it. But about that in a moment, because we first should start from the beginning of this bridge's history, which is the year 1998, the year of the events of Liberty City Stories, the game that's the prequel to GTA 3. In that game, the Callahan Bridge is basically just being built. Up until then, the only form of transport between Portland and Staunton was the subway and ferry transport. But the world goes forward, the city's population grows, and at some point that wasn't enough. So two projects were introduced, Callahan Bridge and Porter Tunnel, which we'll also get to later. The game says the bridge was supposed to open in May 1998. But from the Liberty Tree newspapers, we learned that on October 30th, 1998, Hull was still mayor of Liberty City. Since at that time they were still writing about him as the sitting mayor, it's easy to conclude that construction of the bridge was heavily delayed. Midway through LCS events, Mayor Hull gets killed and his place is taken by Miles O'Donovan. That lets us conclude that Hull's death was in November. So why the delays with the bridge? Most likely it looks similar to the Porter Tunnel. Workers were being paid hourly, not by completed task, so they didn't rush. Needless to say, honesty in Liberty City is hard to find. Anyway, the bridge actually remains under construction all the way until the end of the story we know from Liberty City Stories. In GTA Advance, which is 2 years later in 2000, the bridge is still closed, though only up to a certain point. That means either the bridge got fixed between the two games and then for some unknown reasons closed again for a while, or option 2, that the May 1998 completion date shifted all the way to year 2000, though that sounds pretty wild. Anyway, which option is true we don't know, and both variants we can't really rule out. And so this way we get to the year 2001 and the explosion of the bridge, which came from the Colombian cartel's actions. Why did it happen? Well, the answer lies in GTA Liberty City Stories. Remember how Avery Carrington, along with the cartel, wanted to blow up Fort Staunton so they could rebuild it themselves later? That was one of the cartel's business branches. They had a construction company they controlled, Panlantic Construction. The plan was identical like in LCS. First blow up the bridge, then scoop up the government contract to rebuild it, making big cash. Cruel but effective and highly profitable. In this case, it could have been effective squared because Panlantic Construction was already handling another government project, the construction of the Porter Tunnel. The Porter Tunnel eliminated ferries from the city. The subway tunnels were also under some construction or inspections. So Callahan Bridge was actually the only link between Staunton and Portland. Cutting off that last option meant the tunnel's construction and the bridge's repair became a really urgent matter. That's why Panlantic Construction, and thus the cartel, were probably able to negotiate a better rate for the job, especially promising fast completion. This event shows how much stuff in the GTA series can pass unnoticed. At first glance, you just know that the bridge is destroyed and then repaired. In reality, in the background, such complicated things are happening, and all this was really well thought out, especially considering it's a thing that most players wouldn't even notice. Rockstar could have easily left it in the background, and you couldn't really blame them. But they planned out the whole plot line and tied it into the story we as players participate in. Going further, it's worth tossing a few words about the Porter Tunnel. Its story is honestly one of the most interesting background stories in the whole series. It started in 1998 when Liberty City's mayor, Roger Hull, initiated the tunnel project, one of the entrances of which was bound to be set at the spot of the current ferry terminal. No wonder that initiative wasn't warmly received by the public. The ferries were not only part of the city's tradition, but they, along with related infrastructure like maintenance, provided jobs to many people. To stop the authorities' plans, Jane Hopper, with the help of the Leone Mafia, organized a strike, involving not just ferry industry workers, but also dock and subway workers who stood up for their colleagues. However, the mayor stood firm and didn't intend to cancel the tunnel. Why? Well, Hull wasn't exactly a moral man caring for citizens. The whole thing was another scam. Like I said, the construction company that was hired was Pan-Atlantic Construction, the cartel's company. On top of that, one Liberty Tree issue has Donald Love claiming he had evidence that Hull took bribes in exchange for building contracts. And there you go, the dots connect themselves. Everything points to the cartel bribing Hull so that he'd start the tunnel project and assign city funds to it. Of course, hiring nobody else but their own Pan-Atlantic Construction. And that's not all. One representative of the City Transport Commission shamelessly announced that part of the tunnel's project's money came not only from the city budget, but also from the education budget. The justification was exactly what you think. Since there won't be a tunnel, kids won't be able to get to school anyway. Now, in New York, it's normal for people to live in Brooklyn or Queens and work in Manhattan, but kids usually go to schools near where they live. So bottom line, money was being taken from education and used for something kids wouldn't benefit from at all. And it didn't end there, because not only was the tunnel's construction the result of corruption and funded with education money, but it was also delayed over half a year. Why? Same thing again. The company made up excuses, saying there were technical problems. Of course, those were just to extend the timeline and milk more money for those so-called problems. Along the way, scandals and corruption accusations came out, but whatever the politicians and gangsters stole, it was gone for good. Also, apparently, a big chunk of that school money was spent on, quoting, a party the city had never seen before, which the authorities promised to hold to celebrate the tunnel's completion. So yeah, scam after scam. And inside all this, you can even find a scam within a scam. Seriously. As we mentioned, the initiator was Mayor Hull, who died in 1998. His place was taken by Miles O'Donovan, and one of his campaign promises was that ferries would always run in Liberty City.
As your mayor, I can guarantee there will always be a ferry service in Liberty City.
Sounded good, but in practice, it was a lie. O'Donovan not only eventually totally got rid of ferries, but never stopped the tunnel either. And here's the snag. Looks like O'Donovan inherited the deal with the cartel. That fact was clearly omitted by the Leone Mafia though, who by the end of LCS had the mayor in their pocket. And it was, after all, the same Leone Mafia who was in conflict with the cartel and supporting organizing the strike against the tunnel. So you see, O'Donovan was playing on several fronts at once, with the cartel, with the Leone Mafia, and scamming the people with empty words. That strike also affected the Shoreside lift bridge, the lift bridge connecting Staunton with Shoreside Vale, which was closed in 1998 precisely because of the strike against the tunnel. It dragged on until Miles O'Donovan's election, who, as mentioned, sold the fairy tale that ferries would stay forever in Liberty. And the fairy tale worked. Strikers let go, and the bridge was opened later that same year. In 2000, the bridge was closed again, probably due to a broken draw mechanism. Later that year, it reopened, though the mechanism still didn't work. Repairs restarted at some point and lasted until late 2001, when the mechanism was fixed and the bridge opened again. Another interesting spot is, of course, the Upstate Tunnel. This tunnel supposedly leads to the region of Upstate Liberty, a location that only exists lore-wise in GTA. You can only visit it physically through mods expanding the game, but of course, those are just guesses of how it might have looked like if it actually existed. The tunnel in Liberty City Stories connects Cochrane with Cedar Grove and has a road leading to Upstate Liberty, but for unknown reasons, that road's closed. In GTA Advance, the whole Upstate Tunnel topic should be skipped. There's no Upstate and no tunnel, so it's hard to treat it as part of the canon at all. The tunnel shows up again only in GTA 3 in 2001, but there the player can't access it at all. You can't even drive it between Cochrane Dam and Cedar Grove, unlike in Liberty City Stories in 1998. And what's more, the road just disappeared. Instead, they added 2 new long tunnels leading to Upstate, but shown as still under construction. In the case of Vice City, the cases of both VC and VCS are very similar. In 1984, when VCS takes place, meteorologists warned that Hurricane Gordy could hit near the city, and Vice City was in the danger zone. Since bridges are especially vulnerable to damage from strong winds, the authorities decided to close all bridges and shut down the airport. But here, there's a plot inconsistency. Shutting the airport was logical, but in the game, we see Lance Vance flying into Vice City on a plane, and in a later mission, a gangster plans to leave on a private jet from Escobar International, so Rockstar slipped in a few contradictions. Fun fact, Hurricane Gordy from VCS probably references the real Hurricane Gordon, which actually caused damage in the US, Cuba, and Haiti. Not a coincidence. In Vice City, we meet gangs from those 2 Caribbean countries. Almost the same thing happened in Vice City. This time the threat was Hurricane Hermione, which had already devastated 5 Caribbean islands. In the end, luckily, Vice City mostly just got scared. You can see some destroyed huts on the water that were fine 2 years earlier, so maybe strong winds did touch the city, though that's more speculation than certainty. About the name, in the 70s, Reunion Island was hit by a tropical cyclone named Hermione. Another funny coincidence is that in 2016, 14 years after the game's release, Florida was hit by Hurricane Hermine, named very similarly. In GTA San Andreas, bridges are closed due to earthquake damage from 1 month before the story begins, in December 1991, since according to the hidden calendar system in SA, CJ arrives in Los Santos on January 1, 1992. Like with the Porter Tunnel or Callahan Bridge, there were delays here too, this time from lack of federal funding, as we hear in WCTR News.
The federal government is still refusing aid to help rebuild bridges, and everyone is blaming each other.
In San Andreas, on one of the radio stations, you can hear a pretty absurd joke story. According to it, state governors wanted to bomb Australia in revenge for the earthquake. The idea makes no sense since no country is responsible for natural disasters. And here comes a funny reporter's comment.
The governor is threatening to bomb Australia despite scientific proof it wasn't their fault.
On the surface, it's just not their fault, but in reality, it's a pun. Fault means both guilt, responsibility, and also a tectonic fault line. Earthquakes happen on fault lines, so it's not their fault can mean both not Australia's fault and not their fault line. So that's an Easter egg of Rockstar trying a dumb politician idea with a language joke. And the fault line is actually in the game. You can see it on the screen right now. It's the in-game version of the real San Andreas fault, which is where the state's name comes from. Also note, the 1991 quake isn't the same as the one whose effects you see in San Fierro. The huge damage there comes from 1988's earthquake, which is a totally different scale of destruction.
Why don't you show me around the city?
F***ing terrorists!
What?
Terrorists! There's been a big scare and you can't go across the bridges so good.
Exactly. In GTA 4, the bridge closures were explained by Mayor Ochoa as a terrorist threat. And in theory, it looked pretty bad. Noose estimated that the chance Liberty City would be attacked in the next 5 years was 90%, and there was also some stat, I don't know from where, that 9 out of 10 terrorists called Liberty City their desired target. Authorities explained that closing all bridges was due to a supposed terrorist threat. How was it justified? They found an online recording of a conversation in Arabic. Problem: the experts listening didn't know Arabic at all. And those geniuses heard sounds that phonetically reminded them of the English word slalom. Then they started figuring things out and concluded that slalom rhymes with dirty bomb. Of course, there's no rhyme or sense at all, but no one cared. Why? Well, based on that they raised the terror alert first to Magenta 5, then to Indigo 6, and so all bridges and tunnels got closed. By the way, if you don't know what Magenta 5 or Indigo 6 is, no wonder. It may sound serious and official, but it's actually nonsense parroting how authorities sometimes raise alarms without real reasons, and people are supposed to be scared because the system says so. Another little jab from Rockstar at the system. Anyway, for residents, it ended tragicomic. Many lost jobs because they simply couldn't get to work. Bridges and tunnels only reopened after a long time under pressure from endless complaints. Finally, it's worth pointing out a few Rockstar errors with these bridges. Namely, in TLAD, from the very start, all bridges are open. And that's even though the DLC starts sometime before Algonquin is even unlocked in GTA 4, not to mention Alderney. We know this because in GTA 4, Algonquin unlocks after the mission Blow Your Cover, the one where, with Klebitz and Playboy, you go to handle a deal for Elizabetta. Meanwhile, in TLAD, when you do the parallel mission Buyer's Market, same mission, but from Johnny's perspective, we already see all bridges open. In Ballad, everything fits, since it starts with the bank heist, at which point in GTA 4, the whole map is unlocked. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for the support, thanks for watching, and for the likes and comments. Take care and see you next time. Bye!